Well, hello and welcome to another post-council meeting news conference. We have this after every meeting of the Marshfield Common Council, which is typically every 2 weeks. I'm Steve Barg, I'm the city administrator. Sometimes I'm joined by Mike Warren of Hub City Times, but today I'll just be reporting on my own. Just what went on at the meeting on Tuesday, September 27th. It was a fairly light agenda, but there are a few things we can cover here for you today and some things we can report to you. First of all, before we really got into the meat of the agenda, we had a presentation by Vicki Schnitzler, and she is the chair of the Historic Preservation Committee. We really thank them for all the work that they do for this committee, for this community actually. And annually they call them the Historic Stewardship Awards to people who have worked hard to preserve our historic character here in the community. It could be related to buildings, architecture, programs, ways in which we just preserve the heritage that we have here in the city. There were two recipients that were awarded this honor last night, actually, and one of them was Tom Butke, a former council member, for his work honoring veterans. And he has done just an amazing job to show the respect and the honor and dignity that we need to give to those who have served in our armed forces. I think if you've been to the 2nd Street Community Center, you've seen the great work he's done in there that people can view as they walk around the loop. But he's done a lot of other things, and he was given an award, well-deserved. And also Eric Nelson for his work in the schools. He has been a relentless pursuer of sharing the great heritage and the history that we have in this community with students in our school district, and we're so grateful to both of them. It was nice to honor them and give them applause the other night for their work in preserving the heritage of the city of Marshfield. Staff updates, we normally have some things that come from department heads and others. There were 3 last night. First of all, we welcomed 2 new police officers. Brian Spooner and Hunter Hintz have just joined the Ripon Police Department. the Marshfield Police Department. Used to work in Ripon, that's a long time ago. But they've joined and we were able to meet them and give them some kudos to start off their time. So we thank Jody Goering, the police chief, for presenting them as our newest police officers. We also had a report from our city engineer, Tom Turchi, who, after a meeting that was held a month ago, there were some issues raised about traffic congestion and parking and just the flow of things over there by the middle school. This kind of tied back to a property that the city sold a couple of years ago at 8th and Hemlock, but going beyond that, there's just some concerns that were raised as part of that regarding, again, parking, traffic. Are there accidents occurring over there because of some of the congested, especially during the drop-off and pickup times? So Tom gave a report, shared that there's not a great accident history over there, but that there are some things we can do to improve the traffic flow and the parking. And so he'll be working on that, bringing that through the Board of Public Works in the coming weeks. You'll be hearing more about that. And I think trying to provide a little bit more parking opportunities for people to be able to be safe as they are there around the middle school area, especially, like I said, during the beginning and the end of the school day. And then finally, I gave a real brief update on the 2023 budget. You may recall hearing before that the first meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, October 11th, but we're going to back that up a week. It's a really crazy budget this time. I think I've shared in a previous interview with Tom Laux, the communications director, that there's a gap between revenue and expenses that we're trying really hard to fill. Working through that's taken a little bit longer than we'd hoped. So we're going to have the planned to be second meeting on October 17th be actually the first meeting when the council will take a look at the budget and start working through it. There'll be a series of 3, maybe 4 meetings, 1 per week from October 17th through the first week in November as we get ready for the public hearing on the budget in late November. So I think we're going to do well, but it's just going to take a little bit more time to work out those details. Going into the consent agenda, not a lot there either. A couple of things under Board of Public Works I'll touch on. The council did give a blessing to the attempts to get electric vehicle chargers in the community. You're going to hear more on this because we need to make some changes with respect to parking and a few other things. There's an ordinance involved that we're going to need to change. So you'll be hearing about that in the coming weeks. But effectively, they gave their approval to the notion that we're going to have 5 electric vehicle charging stations in the city of Marshfield on public property. And that'll be opportunities for people with electric vehicles while they're maybe attending a sporting event maybe over by the park, I think is one of them. I think the zoo might be one of them, the library. I guess I don't have them all in front of me right now, but public places that you might be spending some time and your vehicle can charge during that time is the plan. So that'll be going forward. And then a couple of approvals to move forward with some projects, the Lincoln Avenue reconstruction over between 5th Street West and Adler Road. and we approved a relocation order. It ties to the reconstruction project details. And then also moving forward in the Adler Road Trail project. We approved an agreement for engineering services on that project. So those are just milestones along the way to getting those two bigger projects completed in the coming years. Getting down to the main items of business, there were not a lot, as I mentioned. The first was election of Utilities Commissioner. And every year, the Marshfield Utilities Commission has one opening. They have 5 commission members. They serve 5-year terms, so every year one of them is up. We had a little confusion at the meeting, and we'll straighten that out going forward because a policy that was developed by the council, approved by the council back in 2018, says that in order to be on a commission or committee or board, typically you need to be a resident. You need to live within the city limits of the city of Marshfield. But we made a couple of exceptions, and one of them was to say that you could serve if you live outside of the community, if either we can't find qualified applicants for the position that are city residents, or if you really have some special skills, abilities, background, education that would make you a good fit for what that board or committee needs. Those are opportunities for the council to pick someone that is not a resident of the city. Well, we had 4 people being considered for the Utilities Commission role, and it turned out that one of them is not a city resident. So we grappled with that a little bit on how to deal with that. Ultimately, Nate Miller was reappointed. He's been on for the previous several years. I don't think a full 5-year term, but he's been serving on the commission until now. He'll continue for another 5-year term. But we apologize for some of the mix-up. We'll get that straightened out. I think what you'll probably see is that we'll continue to allow people to apply given the parameters, given those conditions, but we definitely will make it known to the council when they're looking at applicants at a meeting that they know if someone on that list is actually a non-resident, that's called out to them very clearly so there's no misunderstanding. Nick Cum, the utilities manager, came forward and he had a request for an ordinance involving removal of lead in galvanized water services. This is part of the continuing effort that utilities has been working on to try and get rid of those old services because you don't want lead pipes now. There's concerns about the water and whatnot, and a lot of the older parts of town have lead services coming off the main. So there's funding available. He talked about that to handle the cost. We're trying to encourage people to plug in and get this done on their private services. There was some concern raised about the fact that there actually is a fine that can be levied against people for not doing that. And we talked about that a little bit, but it does appear that it's going to go forward for second reading on what will be the first meeting in October, on October 11th. And that'll be for second reading and possible approval of that ordinance. I had the next 2 items to report. The first was executing an agreement with Running Incorporated for the 5th year of our 5-year commitment with them. We do an RFP, request for proposals, every 5 years for taxi services, and we usually get 2 or 3 or maybe 4 proposals from qualified vendors. But then even within that 5-year period, we still have to do an annual renewal for the Department of Transportation where we actually take a proactive vote at a council meeting to say, yes, we hereby sign on for another year with our provider. So we're doing a 5th and final year of this agreement with the Running Incorporated from Viroqua. And we're very happy with the great service they provide for taxi. I know that there's periodically concerns or complaints that come up. If you have any, please contact the service, contact the local office of the taxi service, or contact the city if you don't feel they're being resolved. But for the most part, we hear very few complaints, and I think they provide a good service to our community. So next year at this time, in the late summer, early fall, you'll be hearing about going out for proposals for another 5 years to find a taxi service to continue to provide the taxi cab that we have here in Marshfield. The other item I brought forth was coming from Tom Witzel, one of our council members. He had raised concern 2 weeks earlier at the end of a meeting about the cell phone policy. We adopted a fairly tight policy regarding use of cell phones by people on the governing body during the meeting. And the idea about that was to keep people from looking at their cell phones and doing things that aren't work-related during a meeting, or maybe even just when they're on their cell phone, it gives the perception that maybe they're not listening to the person at the podium, or could they possibly be texting another council member or somebody outside of the building? Not that we ever believe that any of our council members or the mayor have ever done that. This is just to make sure that we stay on the good side of the legality of open meetings law, but also perception that we want the public to have, that the people up front that they're looking at are fully engaged with them. So the concern that Tom Witzel had brought up 2 weeks earlier was that we were asking about holding a special meeting. And he keeps his calendar on his phone, as do many people. So he said, well, when I turn on the phone and I look at it, am I violating the cell phone policy? So we talked about that. We reviewed the policy, and a couple of minor changes we're looking at making. One of them is it requires that the people who come to the meeting turn off their phone right away, that their cell phone be turned off before the meeting begins. We've agreed to modify that to be silence it. So in other words, your phone is still there, but it's not turned off, it's just silenced. There is the possibility that maybe a family member might be ill or some emergency might come up in your personal life that you need to see that something happened. And let's say, for example, your spouse got hurt and needed to get a hold of you. At least you can see something come up that you would be able to step out of the room and deal with, but you wouldn't actually be using your thumbs to communicate with people during the meeting in a normal manner. I believe there was one other small modification that was made. I don't have that in front of me right now, but for the most part, the council felt that the policy is good. It puts a good front forward to the public, and it keeps us out of any legal hot water. That was it for the regular business. There was one closed session item, and there was action taken on it when they came back into open session, and that was to sell a 3.83 acre parcel of land down in the Hume Avenue area on the south end of town to a company called H&S Manufacturing. Great company in our community, growing, and the city owns some property near them. And they were saying, can we get 3 or 4 acres of it? We'd really like to expand our operation. We're growing. We want to be able to, build our business even more, but we need more land to do that. So the council did come out in open session and voted in favor of a development agreement to sell them that land, with the understanding that we will refund their purchase price of that land when they put up their improvement. I mean, certainly the value of what they're going to build out there is going to greatly exceed the price of the land. So it's a good deal for us, more tax revenue, more jobs, more development, and just by giving them some additional acreage that the city had no really plans of any kind to develop. So that works out well for everybody. Well, that was all, I think, for this meeting. Not as much as we have in a lot of meetings, because again, the agenda was fairly light. But that wraps up the council meeting from Tuesday, September 27th. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, or you have anything you want us to address on these programs, not just council preview, but the program, Your City at Work, that Tom Laux does a great job with, anything we can address, please let us know at City Hall. Give us a call, give us an email, and tell us what you're thinking and the kind of topics that you'd like us to cover in some of these programs. So on behalf of everyone from the city, thank you to Tom and David, the great work they do here at the station. And to all of you, I say have a great day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Post-Council Meeting News Conference.